I wanted to do a video on picky eating, but I kept putting it off because the problem I have is, look, where do I start? Regardless of what you read on the internet, picky or selective eating can be quite challenging, and throw autism into the mix. I could easily do a 2-day workshop on the topic because it's so complicated. Yeah, like with this video, it actually started as a single video, but has now ballooned into an 8-video series and possibly more. But what this series of videos is not going to be is to give you a very specific protocol or a range of supplements that you can implement and your child will start eating. No, it's more of a roadmap of how to get there. And that's mainly because each child that is a picky or a restricted eater presents with their own unique issues. And in autistic children, it becomes just so much more complicated. For parents looking for help with their child's restricted eating, there is no end of simple advice and tips that Professor Google will find for you. The 15 best ways for parents to handle fussy eaters. Simple solutions to beat picky eating. The scientific reason you're a picky eater. By and large, they don't work because they don't address underlying medical, behavioural and emotional issues. So even simple advice doesn't seem to work, and parents are not consistent. They'll go off, they'll try something briefly, only to fly off to try something else, or keep doing what they've always done because they end up being too stressed or it's just all too hard. But in autism, there are so many more variables to consider as to why your child may be a picky or a selective eater with their food choices, especially since many are non-verbal and can't explain why they are feeling the way they are or why they don't like certain foods. What is overlooked in the discussion on picky eating is that it's a spectrum of eating disorders. At the top, picky, fussy eating. It's an unwillingness to eat familiar foods or try new foods severe enough to interfere with daily routines to an extent that it's problematic to the parent-child or the parent-child relationship. And from an evolutionary perspective, it is actually expected that young children show initial rejection of new foods to ensure that the foods are not poisonous, because if they ate everything they came across, pretty soon they would eat something that's poisonous and they'll die. Or they may have a degree of what some experts call food neophobia, a fear of food, which is generally defined as the reluctance to eat or even sample new foods. On the other end of the spectrum are the rare, extreme picky eaters, or the ultimate refusal of food with pervasive refusal syndrome. Avoidant restrictive food intake disorder is a new diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5. That was previously referred to as selective eating disorder. So selective eating can be at the mild end of the spectrum, and avoidant restrictive food intake or pervasive refusal syndrome, these are at the rarer, more severe end of the eating spectrum. Most advice on picky eating or restricting eating habits is short, it's to the point, and reflects the professional's expertise in their niche field, or more often than not, it's based on somebody's opinion. The pediatrician, do they look healthy? Are they within the expected weight and growth charts? Well, don't worry about it. They don't even bother to do any blood work to see if they're deficient in any nutrients, if they're picky eaters. The dietitian or nutritionist, well, that advice can be hit or miss depending on how good the dietitian is with kids. One mother I saw recently said that when the dietitian saw how bad her son's diet was, said to her, "The most nutritious food in his diet is pizza. Give him pizza for breakfast." I was horrified that this is the quality of the professional advice out there that parents are actually paying for. The OT and speech therapist, they do their own version of feeding therapy. The feeding clinic, well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As I've seen children that eat at the feeding clinic but refuse to eat at home, all when the feeding therapist leaves the home. The naturopath, yep, look, we often say it's low iron or low zinc. Now that'll improve their appetite, or give bitter herbs to stimulate digestion. Well, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. It is rare for someone to look at a child from many different angles as to why they may have a problem with food and eating, and to consider all the many possibilities that are at play. Yeah, look, everything from motor oral issues, gut pathology, nutritional deficiencies, intolerances to food, and many more underlying issues, to probably the hardest issue, how the parent-child emotional connection works, and the parent's own connection with foods as well. I've often had parents say that they don't like vegetables and don't cook a lot of vegetables as well. So parents who model healthy eating habits have children that are less fussy with foods and more likely to try disliked vegetables and have higher intakes of fruits and vegetables as well. And the research clearly shows that children that are fussy eaters, well, eventually they become adults that are fussy eaters as well. Parents often have heard the advice, look, just feed them what you're eating and eventually they'll eat. When they get hungry, they'll eat. Yeah, put up something like that on social media and just wait for the avalanche of divided opinion to come flooding in. As an example, I saw this post on social media. Childhood meals, eat it or go without. Was this true in your house? Well, the avalanche of opinion with that post, yeah, there was over 500, and that was split roughly 30-70. You know, the 30% were more logical, look, yep, let them go hungry, tomorrow they'll eat. Yes, that's the way it was in our house. Then the emotional parents, oh no, I couldn't let them go to bed hungry. I couldn't do that to my child. It's child abuse. And it just confirms how advice on bringing up children can generate such strong emotional responses in parents. Yeah, parents have to understand that there is this bi-directional interplay between both the parent and the child when it comes to parent-child feeding. The parent's actions and thoughts affect the child's actions and thoughts. However, yeah, the child's actions and thoughts also affect the parent's actions and thoughts as well. Do the parent's feeding practices influence the child? Or does the child's behaviour influence the feeding practice used by the parent? Ideally, you want a cooperative environment where the parent and child negotiate an outcome that is mutually acceptable and allows the goals of both to be upheld, you know, during the whole eating process, rather than having a very uncooperative environment where the parent and child, they resist each other during meal times, and in the end there's no acceptable outcomes. There's no winner in the end. This increased stress may lead to either making the situation worse between parent and child, or a situation in which parents eventually withdraw from their efforts and basically cater to the child's will, allowing poor dietary habits just to prevail. Yeah, the other comment I often hear in clinic is, my child will starve to death before eating. We need to differentiate hunger from starvation. Like, hunger is the feeling of discomfort or weakness caused by a lack of food, coupled with the desire to eat. Starvation, or to starve, is to suffer or die, or cause to suffer or die from hunger. Like starve, it is such an emotional word. Most of the time we're talking about the child being hungry, not starving. And let's put this into perspective. If a child is picky or selective eater, yeah, there will be malnutrition to consider. Yeah, malnutrition is a lack of proper nutrition caused by not having enough to eat, not eating enough of the right foods. And so what I hear with parents is, oh, look, we don't want to push them. We don't want to put unrealistic demands on them. But to that I say, but you're happy to malnourish them in their vital years of growth and development, depriving their gut flora of the fibre it needs for that gut-brain connection. And let's not forget, basically we are starving them of the essential nutrients that they need. And we are now seeing alarming reports of autistic children with common and rare nutritional deficiencies. Anemia due to low iron. Look, that's very common in picky eaters and children that are picky eaters on the autism spectrum. However, we're also seeing rickets due to low vitamin D, causing bone deformities. And scurvy. Yeah, look, scurvy is so rare. We only saw it in sailors many, many years ago, due to low vitamin C. But we're seeing more and more reports of scurvy coming up in the literature in autistic children. And children going blind due to vitamin A. This year I've seen 2 case studies reported with children that have gone blind due to picky eating and low vitamin A. And the sad thing here is that in one case it was permanent, even when they repleted that child with vitamin A. Now that's really sad. And poor gut health due to low fibre and polyphenols. So there is a clear link between selective eating and the severity of psychiatric disorders. Selective eating affects the selection of nutritious foods, which in turn changes that composition of your gut bacteria. Both can change brain chemistry by causing mood issues like anxiety and depression. And why? Because the brain is a biochemical factory. It needs good quality, essential nutrients to function properly and to grow. Eating is such a fundamental physiological process to sustain life and for social connection. Autism should not be an excuse for parents to give up and malnourish their child. Now that sounds pretty severe to say something like that, but to me, autism means we need to work harder to work out why they don't eat and ensure they are not malnourished. I'm a logical person. For every problem there's a solution. Identifying the core of the problem, that will actually guide you to the solution. But that is also the hardest part, identifying the core of the problem. Remember, it is a spectrum of eating disorders. Where does your child fit on the spectrum? Are there any underlying issues that we should be considering and correcting? And what is the bidirectional influence between you and the child and your child as well? I've always been fascinated that you never hear of picky eating issues in indigenous cultures living traditionally off the land. I haven't heard of picky eating in animals in the wild. Like, have you ever heard of David Attenborough say, "See that pack of wild hyenas over there in a feeding frenzy? Except for that one over there that won't eat because it's fussy." But our pets, I hear all the time, "My pet is fussy. It only eats fillet steak prepared in a certain way," or will only eat a certain brand of pet food. Like, what have we done to our animals that they've become so picky in their eating? And what have we done to our children? Look, these may seem like odd comments, but stick with me through this series of picky eating videos, because the 8th video in the series may change everything you thought you knew about feeding young children. Yes, it is complicated, and you need someone that is able to assess all possibilities. And unfortunately, people like that, they're rare in medical practice. In my following videos, we continue to look at the topic of selected eating, like what are the red flags that we should be considering? What are the underlying medical issues we need to consider? Is there any allergy or intolerance to foods? What are the emotional issues that the child has with food? Are there any avoidance behaviours around food? And yes, the all-important parent-child interaction as well. We'll look at that as well. And if you think that your child is a picky or a restrictive eater, I'll actually be presenting some case studies of children with very severe eating habits, and there's a lot we can learn from these case studies because they are real life experiences. And saved for the very last, an experiment done in young children. I think you may find confronting, yet may explain why the advice on how we feed our children from birth has actually gone so horribly wrong compared to how our ancestors fed our children. So I hope you enjoyed this introduction to picky and restricted eating, and I hope you will follow me on this journey and listen to the rest of the picky eating series. As usual, I encourage you to leave your comments below, and please share to try and help get that message out there, especially to the parents that are struggling every single day with their children. And thank you very much for listening.